I have been asked dozens of times, what is my opinion on the House of David? And so today, we're talking about that. And quickly, I apologize for my voice, but I'm getting over a sinus infection type of thing, so I sound extra gorgeous right now. This is going to be broken down into basically 3 categories, which is going to be biblical accuracy, whether or not it's sinful, and whether or not I would recommend watching it. At the beginning of every episode, there is a little banner that pulls up that says that this may not be historically or biblically accurate. It explains that it must come up with some aspects of artistic leniency in order for their storytelling purposes. That is completely understandable. However, whenever these shows that are claiming to do something based on the Bible are doing it in a way where they are actually altering that which is clear in the Bible, that's where I have a problem. So to give you an example on that, and this is not a spoiler of the show, this is literally the first few minutes of the show. It starts off with the battle of David and Goliath, but it only goes to the first half. Then you have to wait until the very end of episode 8 to see the results of that. Now, throughout the entire show, they have immense amounts of additional stuff that is just made up side stories. And the made up side stories, I'm okay with. That's where there's like that artistic leniency. You can make up that kind of stuff. But when the Bible is extraordinarily clear about something and you intentionally deviate from that, that's where I'm going to have an issue. So here's the example. I'm going to read you the Bible's account of that battle, and then I'm going to tell you what the show did instead. Then it happened when the Philistine rose and came and drew near to meet David, that David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. And David sent his hand down into his bag and took from it a stone and slung it and struck the Philistine on his forehead. And the stone sank into his forehead so that he fell on his face to the ground. Thus David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and he struck the Philistine and put him to death. But there was no sword in David's hand. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine and took his sword and drew it out of its sheath and put him to death and cut off his head with it. So you see what happens is David gets 5 smooth stones from a stream. He goes out, he only needs 1. The reason why he gets 5, as we see from a different book in the Bible, specifically either Kings or Chronicles, it mentions that Goliath had 4 brothers, and so those were his backup plan. This is how confident David was. David was already at this point an incredible fighter. But in the show, they make him this weak little frail scrawny beta boy. And whenever he goes to fight Goliath, the Bible records that Goliath had a sword and a spear strung on his back. He had a javelin. In the House of David, he has a field full of all these javelins for every day that he's gone out to mock God. And so in the Bible, it is a Mortal Kombat level flawless victory. Like, it is quite literally, David gets this perfect shot, drops him untouched, flawless, miraculous, impossible victory. In the movie, Goliath is throwing spear after spear after spear at David as he's running, and one of those spears actually clips into David, cutting him, knocking him unconscious on the ground. Now, during this time while he's unconscious on the ground, there's all this dramatic stuff about people thinking he's gonna fail, worrying about him, thinking he's dead. Then he gets up, then he launches the stone as Goliath is throwing the spear. But it doesn't sink in his forehead, it goes up underneath his helmet and it cracks his skull at some unknown place up here. Which means that not only did they not understand what this is right here when they made the show, they didn't understand that this entire battle is literally, the entire point of it is that it's a flawless victory that this little dude about 5 feet tall takes on someone who's 8 feet taller than him. Flawlessly, doesn't take any damage, but in the show, they make him take damage. And so when I started watching episode 1, I was thinking, okay, maybe they're going to do something with this where this is like him having a dream, worrying about what could happen. That's not the case. I wasted all the time watching the over 8 hours of this show to see that they just perverted that entire story drastically, and it bothered me a lot. Now, they do have that caveat saying it is not going to be biblically accurate. And that is in fact true. They basically made sure it would not be biblically accurate. And it's not just with that, the inaccuracies go throughout the entirety of the show. Like, it is a very inaccurate show. They have David's mom be different than his brother's moms, and that comes from a Jewish misinterpretation of Psalm 51:5, where David says, "I've been sinful from the moment my mother conceived me," but some people take that on the translation that says, "In sin did my mother conceive me," as trying to claim that his mother was sinful, but his mother was the same mother of his brothers, and he was the youngest, which means it wasn't some extramarital affair that brought him into this world. But yet that single thing that is highly argued and not a very credible interpretation of the text, that is basically the main point of the entire show. Everything is that David is the son of Jesse's shame. But now, is this show sinful? Not really. You see, there's only one point in this show that makes a depiction of Jesus, makes a depiction of God. And they do it referencing Joshua when the angel of the Lord, which was Jesus, it was a theophany, was standing at. He was the Lord of hosts, that he was literally God standing in the way. And they do make it very prevalent that this angel of the Lord is in fact the Lord. It is literally Yahweh. But they do make a depiction of him. Though they don't give a lot of details on him, they just show him as a warrior. It's not as big of a deal compared to shows like The Chosen that consistently and perpetually is making a depiction of God that is perverting who God is and changing every attribute of him. The Chosen is an incredibly sinful show. House of David is not very sinful of a show. And would I recommend it? I would definitely never recommend The Chosen because it is really bad, it is really dangerous, and it is hyper sinful. House of David is not accurate. But that being said, it is a well-done show. The acting in it is good. The production value for the show is phenomenal. And so I would recommend watching the show, actually, as long as you understand it's not accurate. If you get that idea of maybe this is how it happened, don't do that because most of it is inaccurate. Now, I watched all of season 1, and I do not think I will be watching season 2 because it was not good enough for me to want to perpetually watch something that is that inaccurate. So if you want to watch House of David, there's nothing wrong with watching it. Just know it's not accurate, basically at all.